Hey guys, welcome back to Mind Your Conversions, brought to you by Fiverr. If you're new here, this is where we break down the art and science of marketing with our hosts, Liv and Max. They will help you understand marketing better, explore fresh strategies, and most importantly, drive higher conversions. So whether you're a seasoned pro, or even if you're just getting started, you're at the right place.
All right, let's dive in. We're tackling CRO today. Got this super detailed guide, common CRO mistakes, and how to avoid them.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I figured we could really unpack it.
Definitely.
It's kind of scary to think you could be putting in all this work to improve your website.
Oh, yeah.
Boost those conversions, and you might be totally sabotaging yourself without realizing it.
It happens all the time.
Really?
Oh, yeah. People think, oh, it's the price, it's got to be the design, but then they look at the data, and surprise, something totally different's going on.
So the data is kind of like our detective then. Huh. It's revealing those hidden clues about why those conversions aren't happening.
That's it. And you got to use all the tools, not just basic analytics. Heat maps, for example. Those show you where people are clicking,
Right.
scrolling, even just hovering on your pages. It's like you're seeing the website through their eyes.
I've used heat maps.
Yeah.
But I feel like I've only scratched the surface. What other ways could you use them to get those deeper insights?
Well, different types of heat maps exist, right? You've got the scroll maps showing how far down the page people are actually going.
So you know if they're even seeing your key content.
Exactly. And then there are click maps, which can reveal those rage clicks.
Rage clicks.
Yeah, those frustrated clicks when someone's hunting for something but can't find it.
Oh, I've done that plenty of times, so I can see how tracking that would be useful.
And don't forget session recordings. You can literally watch how individual users are interacting with your site, see where they get stuck or confused or bail on their cart.
Sounds a bit like spying, but I guess in a good way.
Exactly. You're trying to help them have a better experience. And speaking of experiences, we got to talk hypotheses. You can't just change random things on your website and hope for the best.
Right, you got to have a reason.
A solid hypothesis to guide your testing.
The guide had an example of a company that changed the color of their call to action button and got no improvement.
Probably thought, green buttons, got to convert better, everyone said so.
Happens to the best of us.
That's the problem, relying on assumptions, not data. Weak hypothesis like that just wastes time and resources, throwing darts blindfolded.
Maybe you hit the target, but mostly by chance, not skill.
Exactly. So before you tweak anything, you need a strong, data-backed reason. Like, say you're seeing a lot of people abandoning their carts at checkout.
Yeah, a classic problem.
Instead of assuming it's the shipping costs, you dive into those session recordings, the heat maps. Notice maybe people are getting stuck on a specific form field.
I see.
Your hypothesis could be, if we simplify this field, less required entries, then we'll see fewer abandoned carts.
Makes sense. Then you run a test to see if you're right.
Of course. But here's another mistake people make. Not enough people in the test. Like judging a whole restaurant based on one bite of one dish.
Yeah, I can see that.
You need enough data to be sure your results are statistically significant.
Mating.
They're not just due to chance. There are calculators for this, but in general, larger sample size is better, especially if you're testing on a page that doesn't get a ton of traffic.
Okay, got it. So we've got data, strong hypothesis, decent sample size. What's next on the CRO checklist?
Segmentation. Can't treat all your website visitors the same, right? It's like using the same marketing message for teenagers and retirees. Not going to resonate with everyone.
I get that, but there are so many ways to segment.
Yeah.
Where do you even begin?
Start with your goals. What are you trying to accomplish? Then look at your data. See if there are patterns in how people behave based on demographics, device, where their traffic's coming from.
Even past behavior on the site, right?
Absolutely. You start to notice things like maybe mobile users are converting way less than desktop.
So then I create a specific CRO strategy just for mobile optimization.
Precisely. Segmentation lets you create targeted experiences for each group. It can really boost those overall conversion rates.
This is great stuff. Data, hypotheses, sample size, segmentation. What other CRO traps should we watch out for?
Blindly following best practices, that's a big one.
Wait, best practices are bad. I thought those were,
They're okay as a starting point, but every website's different. Every audience is unique.
Yeah.
What works for one business might flop for another.
Like in the guide, that company trying to improve their checkout rate, they did all the best practices and it backfired.
They were so focused on those generic tips that they forgot to think about their own customers' needs and behaviors. trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
So best practices are more like starting points, things to test out.
Exactly. You need to understand your audience, your data, to build a CRO strategy that actually works for you.
This is like a masterclass in avoiding CRO disasters.
Yeah. Glad you think so.
What else is there to cover?
Let's talk about those little wins, the microconversions.
You mean like filling out a form, adding something to the cart, even just clicking a button?
Exactly. They might seem small, but they're like breadcrumbs leading to the main conversion goal.
But are they really that important?
Absolutely. They give you insights into user behavior, show you where the friction points are. Like if you see tons of people adding to cart but not completing the purchase, that tells you something's up with the checkout process. Exactly. They're interested in your products, but something's stopping them.
Yeah.
And speaking of stopping them...
Oh, another pitfall coming. Tell me more.
Page load speed. These days, you can't afford to have a slow website. People will just bounce if it takes too long to load.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm one of those people who close the tab after a few seconds if it's still loading.
And it's not just actual speed, it's how fast it feels. You can use tricks to make it feel faster, even if you can't magically improve your server speed. Optimize images, lazy loading, prioritize that above the fold content.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. Always some actionable tips.
Glad you like it. And speaking of actionable tips, qualitative data is super important.
You're right. I tend to get lost in the numbers, all those charts and graphs.
It's easy to do, but qualitative data is important because it tells you why things are happening, not just what's happening. Like, say you've got a high bounce rate on a certain landing page. The numbers tell you people are leaving, but not the reason why.
Gotcha.
That's where qualitative data steps in, surveys, feedback widgets, even session recordings.
So like, I might add a little survey that pops up when someone's about to leave the page. What made you leave this page? Something like that.
Exactly. Or watch session recordings to see if they're getting confused by something on the page.
This is making me think that analyzing data is like being a detective.
In a way, yeah.
You're looking for clues, putting together a story.
You got it. And speaking of stories, have you noticed how some websites just feel clunky? Like forever to find what you want, and the checkout process is an obstacle course.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
I almost abandoned my cart yesterday because it was so frustrating.
That's a perfect example of a cluttered user journey. The guide uses the analogy of a hallway full of obstacles. If you want people to reach their destination, you need to clear the path, make it smooth and intuitive.
So how do we declutter that hallway?
Starts with understanding how people are navigating your site. Use heat maps, session recordings, all that to see where the pain points are. Then you can simplify your navigation, minimize distractions, streamline that user flow.
Can you give me some specific examples?
Absolutely. Make sure your navigation is clear and easy to understand. Use descriptive labels, not too many menu items. Consider breadcrumbs to help people find their way.
Gotcha.
You can also simplify your forms by reducing the number of required fields. And if you have a multi-step checkout process, a progress bar can really help.
Ah, progress bars. They make me feel like I'm getting somewhere.
It's all about giving people a sense of control and progress. Speaking of control, setting clear goals for your CRO is crucial.
You gotta know what you're aiming for.
The guide uses a sports analogy. Just like a team needs a clear objective to win, your CRO needs those well-defined goals. And those goals should be SMART. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
I love a good acronym.
Yeah.
So instead of just saying, I want to increase conversions, I should set a goal like, I want to increase the conversion rate on my checkout page by 5% in the next quarter.
Now you're talking. That gives you a clear target and a way to track your progress.
I'm starting to feel less overwhelmed by all this. Breaking it down into steps makes CRO seem much more approachable.
That's what we want, making CRO accessible for everyone.
Speaking of accessible, I sometimes get overwhelmed by just how much data there is. Any tools or techniques that can help with data analysis?
There are so many great tools out there. Google Analytics is a good starting point, and it's free. For heat maps and session recordings, tools like Hotjar and Crazy Egg are popular.
Right.
For A/B testing, you've got Optimizely, VWO, and Google Optimize, just to name a few.
Wow, so many options. It's kind of cutting.
It is. CRO is all about experimenting and discovering. And sometimes those discoveries come from the tests that don't go as planned.
You mean the failed tests?
Let's call them learning opportunities. The guide makes a good point that there are no true failures in CRO, only chances to learn and refine your approach.
So when a test doesn't lead to a big increase in conversions, we shouldn't just give up on it. We should try to understand why it didn't work.
Exactly. Maybe the hypothesis wasn't quite right, or there was something else affecting the results. Carefully analyze the data, and you can uncover valuable insights.
This is a good reminder that CRO is ongoing, not a one-time fix.
Absolutely. You've got to be constantly monitoring, testing, optimizing. And that brings us to another mistake: complacency.
Uh-oh, I see where this is going. Get a decent conversion rate, and then just sit back and relax, think you've got it all figured out.
And then your competitors come in and steal all your customers.
Okay, maybe a little dramatic, but I get the point. The online world is always changing.
You got to keep up.
You can't just rest on your laurels. Got to keep evolving that CRO strategy.
Your audience's needs and behaviors are constantly evolving, so your website and your CRO efforts need to evolve with them. What worked yesterday might not work today, and what works today might not work tomorrow.
So how do we stay ahead of the curve?
Stay curious, experiment constantly, and challenge your assumptions. Don't be afraid to try new things, and most importantly, never stop learning.
I love that. This whole deep dive has been all about the power of continuous learning.
Exactly. And speaking of learning, we've covered a lot today.
We have data, hypotheses, segmentation, the user journey, qualitative data, microconversions, the dangers of complacency. But I feel like there's one piece missing.
What's that?
We talked about analyzing data from tests, both the wins and the learning experiences.
Right.
But how do you know what to test in the first place? Where do you even start?
Great question. And a lot of marketers struggle with it. The key is to start by understanding your goals and your audience. What are you trying to do? Who are you trying to reach? And what are their pain points and motivations?
So before even thinking about A/B tests or website tweaks, you got to have a solid understanding of your ideal customer.
Exactly. What are they looking for? Once you have that foundation, you can brainstorm potential areas for improvement. Look for friction in the user journey, places where people are dropping off, anything confusing or unclear.
So I might start by looking at my website analytics to see which pages have the highest bounce rates or where people are abandoning their carts.
Absolutely. And don't forget about qualitative data. Talk to your customers, conduct surveys, read online reviews. You might be surprised at what you learn.
This is great advice. I feel like I have a much better understanding of how to approach CRO strategically.
And that's what we're here for, making CRO easy to understand and use.
I definitely feel a lot less intimidated by CRO now. That's actually kind of exciting.
It is exciting. It's all about experimentation, discovery, and constantly getting better.
And speaking of constantly getting better, so before we were talking about things that prevent conversions.
Right.
And you were going to tell me more.
Yeah, page load speed. Can't forget about that.
Oh, yeah.
Huge factor these days. If your site's slow, people are out of there.
I'm definitely one of those people.
I get it.
A few seconds, I'm like, nope. Closing the tab.
And it's not just the actual loading time, it's the perceived speed.
What do you mean?
You can make it feel faster, even if your server's not the quickest. Optimizing images, lazy loading, making sure that above-the-fold content loads first, things like that.
I see.
Make it snappy for the user.
Okay, so some technical stuff involved there.
A bit, yeah. But it's worth it.
See, this is what I love about these deep dives. Always walk away with some actionable tips.
And speaking of actionable tips, don't underestimate qualitative data.
It's easy to get lost in the numbers, I'll admit.
Yeah, all those charts and graphs.
But why is qualitative data so important?
It gives you the why behind the what, Numbers might show you people are bouncing off the page, but they don't tell you the reason. Qualitative data can. Surveys, feedback widgets, those session recordings we talked about.
So if I'm seeing a high bounce rate, I might add one of those little surveys that pops up when someone's about to leave.
Yeah, exactly.
Ask them, hey, why are you leaving?
Or watch the session recordings to see if they're tripping up on something specific.
I'm starting to see data analysis less like number crunching and more like detective work.
That's a good way to put it.
You're searching for clues, building a narrative.
I like it. And speaking of narratives, ever notice how some websites are just clunky to use? You can't find what you're looking for. The checkout's a nightmare.
All the time.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, almost abandoned my cart because it was so frustrating.
The guide called it a cluttered user journey, like a hallway full of obstacles.
Okay, yeah.
If you want people to reach the end, you got to make the path smooth, intuitive.
So how do we declutter the hallway, so to speak?
You got to understand how people are using your site. Heat maps, session recordings, those are your friends.
To identify the pain points.
Right. Then simplify the navigation, cut out distractions, streamline the whole flow.
Can you give me some specifics?
Sure. Make sure your navigation's clear, easy to understand. Use descriptive labels, not a million menu items. Breadcrumbs can help too.
Makes sense.
Forms too. Fewer required fields is usually better.
Right.
And if you've got a multi-step checkout, use a progress bar.
Oh, progress bars. I love those.
They're great. Give people a sense of, okay, I'm getting somewhere.
Exactly. Like I'm in control making progress.
And speaking of control, clear goals for your CRO are essential.
You got to know who you're aiming for.
Absolutely. The guide had a nice sports analogy. A team needs a goal to win, right?
Right.
Same with CRO. Well-defined goals. And they should be smart. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound.
I love a good acronym. So instead of just saying, I want to increase conversions, I'd say, I want to increase conversions on my checkout page by 5% this quarter.
That's it. Clear, measurable, something to track.
This is starting to feel way less overwhelming.
Glad to hear it.
Breaking it down like this, CRO actually seems doable.
That's the goal. We want to make CRO approachable for everyone.
Speaking of approachable, all this data can be intimidating. Any tools or tips to make data analysis easier?
So many tools out there. Google Analytics is a great starting point. It's free. For heat maps and session recordings, Hotjar and Crazy Egg are popular choices.
Yeah, I've heard of those.
Then for A/B testing, Optimizely, VWO, and Google Optimize are good ones.
So many choices.
There are. It can be overwhelming, but it's also kind of exciting, right? All this potential.
Yeah, I guess it is.
CRO is about experimenting, making discoveries, and sometimes those discoveries come from the tests that didn't quite go as planned.
The failed ones.
Let's call them learning opportunities. The guide had a good point. No real failures in CRO, only chances to learn and get better.
So even if a test doesn't give me a huge conversion boost, I shouldn't write it off. I should dig in and try to figure out why it didn't work.
Exactly. Was the hypothesis off? Sample size too small? Maybe something else was going on that affected the results?
You know, I never thought about that.
By analyzing the data, you can find those hidden gems, insights to inform your next move.
It really is a process, isn't it?
It is. Ongoing. Always evolving.
Not just a one-time fix.
And that brings us to another common trap. Complacency.
Oh, I think I know this one. You get a decent conversion rate, and you think, okay, I'm done.
And then, boom, your competitors are passing you by.
Okay, maybe not boom, but
you get the point, right?
the internet doesn't stand still.
Never.
You got to keep up, keep refining that strategy.
Your audience changes, their needs change, what worked before might not work now.
So how do we stay ahead of the game?
Stay curious, experiment, and don't be afraid to question your assumptions.
I like that.
Don't be scared to try something new, even if it seems a little out there. Most importantly, never stop learning.
I've learned so much in this deep dive already. It's amazing.
Glad to hear it. And speaking of learning, we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have. But I feel like there's one piece missing.
What's that?
We've talked about analyzing the data, figuring out why tests worked or didn't work.
Right.
But how do you even know what to test in the first place? Where do you start?
The million-dollar question. So many marketers get stuck there. It comes back to understanding your goals and, like we said before, your audience.
Yeah, we talked about that.
What are you trying to achieve? Who are you trying to reach? What are their pain points, their motivations?
So before any A/B tests, any website changes, you got to have a solid understanding of your ideal customer.
Exactly. What makes them tick? Once you have that foundation, you can start brainstorming. Look for friction in the user journey, places where people are leaving, anything that's confusing.
So I might start by looking at my analytics, see which pages have high bounce rates or where people are abandoning their carts.
That's a great place to start. And don't forget qualitative data.
Right, talk to the customers, the survey.
See what they have to say. You might be surprised what you learn.
This is really helpful. I'm starting to feel like I have a handle on CRO now.
That's what we like to hear.
It's not so scary anymore. It's actually kind of exciting.
It is exciting, always experimenting, learning, making things better.
And speaking of making things better, so before we were talking about making things better and, well, sometimes things don't go as planned.
True, you can have the best intentions, solid strategy,
Right.
but sometimes the results just aren't there.
You're bringing up the F word again, failure.
Let's call them learning experiences. The guide really emphasizes that there are no true failures in CRO, only chances to learn and refine your approach.
So instead of getting bummed when a test doesn't give me a big conversion boost,
Great.
I should be looking at the data, figuring out why it didn't work.
Exactly. Was the hypothesis wrong? Sample size too small? Maybe something else was happening at the same time that skewed the results.
It's like there's always something to learn, even when things don't go perfectly.
You got it. And analyzing the data can reveal those hidden insights you can use next time.
You mentioned documenting your findings, even from those learning experiences.
Oh, absolutely. Keep a record of everything, the wins, the, let's call them opportunity.
Opportunities, yeah.
Write down your hypotheses, how you did the test, the results, and most importantly, what you learned from it.
Like building a CRO knowledge base.
Exactly. What works, what doesn't work for your website, your audience. Over time, you start to see patterns.
Yeah, you learn what resonates with your people.
And that knowledge is gold.
This is making me think of CRO, like being a scientist, always experimenting, observing, tweaking the hypothesis based on the data.
Great analogy. And just like a scientist, got to be open to new ideas, challenge those assumptions. CRO is always changing, always something new to learn.
So where can our listeners go to stay up to date with all this?
So many great resources out there, blogs, podcasts, conferences, even online courses. A few of my favorites are the CXL blog, the Conversion XL Institute, the Unbounce blog.
I've heard of those, but I gotta admit, sometimes it's just too much information.
I hear you. Start by figuring out what you need, what you want to achieve, then look for resources that address those specific things.
Don't just blindly follow any advice you see.
Right. Look for experts who've actually got results, and be wary of anything that sounds too good to be true.
Good advice. This has been an amazing deep dive into CRO.
It has.
We talked about all those common mistakes, how to avoid them, how to build that culture of continuous improvement.
Love that phrase, continuous improvement.
Anything else you want our listeners to take away from this?
CRO is a journey, not a destination. It's all about experimenting, learning, adapting to your audience. Embrace the process, stay curious, and never stop optimizing.
Perfect. So to wrap up, here's what we learned today. Data is king. But don't forget the why behind the numbers. Test your ideas, challenge the status quo, make the user experience smooth and personalized. And most importantly, keep learning, keep growing, keep optimizing. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.
Happy optimizing, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in. That's it for this episode of Mind Your Conversions, brought to you by Fiber. I hope you are leaving with fresh ideas and strategies to take your marketing and your conversions to the next level. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Thanks for listening. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time.